Hi guys, thanks for joining me today. Now on today's video, I'm going to make a couple of sublimation pillowcases. This is a quick project, it's a pretty easy project, and it really doesn't cost much. So I'm going to start with a couple of pillowcases that I bought at Walmart. These are 100% polyester, and to me they work the best for sublimation. If you go with less than 100% polyester, you can lose some of the vibrancy after you wash it. So I'm going to use 100% polyester pillowcases. I'll also use some sublimation paper from Koala. Now I bought this off of Amazon. If you watch my videos, you know that my go-to paper is usually HTV Romp paper, but I don't have any of that yet in this size, and this has worked well. So we're going to use Koala Bear paper. I have this 16 by 20 inch heat press. This is an inexpensive heat press that I bought off of Amazon just recently. It's making its debut in a recorded video today, but I have used it in some of my lives. Now the printer that I'll use today is an Epson EcoTank 15,000. That's not meant to be a sublimation printer. It wasn't marketed to be a sublimation printer, but if you watch YouTube, you know a lot of crafters use those as sublimation printers. They call it converting it. All that means is instead of putting the ink in it that came with it, you simply put sublimation ink in it instead. Of course, I'm going to use my computer and the images that I got off of Creative Fabrica, as well as some heat-resistant tape and a lint roller to clean my pillowcases. So if this sounds like something you're interested in, sit back, relax, and let's get started. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to show you my design. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I do want you to understand how I made this design. I started with a file from Creative Fabrica, and here is that file, but you're going to notice my heart looks very different than that. So after I brought this in, I went ahead and got rid of this heart and brought in a different one. And then for the color of the word sweet and dreams, I used this paper to colorize it. For the heart up here and the arrow down here, I just selected a couple of colors that were in my design, and I used that to change those to something that would match really well. Now, if you're not sure how to do all that, let me know. I can do just a design video, but for this one, I wanted to show you how you can use pillowcases and sublimation ink to make something really cute. Now, the pillows will look like this. So when they're laying side by side, on this one, the heart will be on the right, this one on the left, and with this one, the arrow is pointing right, and this one's pointing left. When you're printing your designs, it's important that they show up on the paper template that you're using. So this is a 19 by 13 paper template. I made sure my design fits within it. If the design was like this, then anything to the left of it would get cut off. All right, let's go ahead and print these. With this selected, I'm going to go up to Object, and I'm going to flip it horizontally, because with most sublimation projects, that's what you do. I'll click this one, and I'll flip it as well. The only projects that I've done where you don't flip your image horizontally is when you're actually using the sublimation ink below the blank. So for example, a cutting board that's a glass cutting board, and your sublimation design is sublimating to the bottom of your blank. If you're putting your image on the top of your blank, then you're going to mirror your design. To print this, I go to File, Print, or you could use the shortcut. I'm going to print this on my Epson EcoTank 15,000 printer. Then I'll go right here to Page Setup. I want to make sure that it's on one-sided. I'll skip over to Color, make sure it's going to print in color, and then on Advanced, I pick the high setting for my sublimation images. So let's go ahead and print this out. We'll watch it print out. After it does, I'll just go ahead and print the second one, and then I'll meet you back at the table. I finished printing out my two designs, and you might notice they don't look real vibrant. That's typical with sublimation ink. Until you add that high heat and the pressure, They just aren't real vibrant, but that'll change. Now it's time to go ahead and pre-press my pillowcases. Now I'm going to do this for two reasons. First and foremost, the main reason is you want to remove any moisture that might be in the fabric. Second of all, I just want a nice flat smooth surface to work on. Now I have my heat press set for 390 degrees and the timer set for 55 seconds. It's not quite up to the right temperature in order to press sublimation yet, but it is hot enough to go ahead and pre-press these. So that's what I'll do, and then I'll meet you back here. Sometimes in crafting, you have to come up with a plan B, and that was the case here. When I opened those white pillowcases, I saw that they were king size. They are huge. So fortunately, I had some pretty purple ones that I'm going to use instead. Let me show you how big these white ones are. So the purple one is a standard size pillowcase, and there's an additional probably 10 inches on the end of this. That's not going to work for the project that I'm doing, and so we're going to improvise. We're going to use this purple one. Now before I pre-press this, I am going to use a lint roller to remove any excess fibers, dust, debris, things like that. If you don't, sometimes the high heat can cause those to turn kind of a bluish color on your fabric, and it stains the fabric. So now let's go ahead and pre-press these purple pillowcases. Now I'm going to start with the left pillowcase, and I do want you to see I have some butcher paper inside. I don't know that the ink would go all the way through to the back, but I don't like to take those chances. I want to have my design centered between the right side of the case and basically where this thick thing that's beyond your pillow is. So between here and here. Before I start placing it though, I need to get my print ready. Now I want to make sure this is the correct one for the left pillow. It'll be facing like that, and the arrow is facing to the middle. So that's exactly what I want. Now sometimes when your paper goes through a sublimation printer, it collects a little bit of ink on the edges, and you can't see that usually. Also, if you press this like this, you're going to have hard edges pressed into your pillowcase. So what I like to do is I like to rip my paper. So I'm going to make sure I don't rip into the actual design. And when you rip this paper, I'll hold this up in a minute to show you, but the paper comes in layers. It's not just one thick piece of paper, or at least when you rip it, it comes up in layers. And that's going to soften that edge. So let me go ahead and get around this first one. I'll pick it up, show you what I mean. Now when you're doing that, just make sure you don't get too close to your design and rip part of it off. So hopefully you can see how it rips up in layers. And so where the top layer is gone, this is going to be a softer edge, and you're not going to notice the impression in the pillowcase as much. All right, so I think my design is fairly well centered in the part that I ripped off, so I'm not going to be too picky about it, but I am going to make it just a little bit better. All right, so if I center that in the pillowcase, or in the part of the pillowcase I want to center it in, I think I'll be fine. Now let's see, is there about the same space at the top and the bottom? This is a little closer to the paper. I can see through the paper enough to get it acceptable. But I do want to make sure that my arrow is fairly straight. All right, I think I'm going to go with that. Now I am going to tape this down. I don't want this to shift at all when I'm putting the platen down onto it, or even more importantly, when you lift that platen up, if you don't have your paper taped down, it can cause the paper to rise or jump a little bit, and then as the paper settles back down on your fabric, that can cause it to get blurry. Kind of like if you were to see with double vision, but not that extreme. Now, if you have an automatic open heat press, it's probably even more important. If I were doing sublimation and I had an automatic open heat press, not necessarily the HTV Ront because those are pretty slow coming up, but if I had a big industrial one that jumps up, I would either try to turn off the auto open, or I would hold my hand on top of it with a glove on while that's getting ready to pop up. And I'll actually do that even on this one, despite that it's not an auto open. Okay, that's probably way too much tape. It'll be okay. Now this is a really large press to try to do it under the camera on the table like this. Hopefully it goes well, but what I want to do is I want to go ahead and put this on the platen of my heat press. This platen rolls out, which is a really nice feature. I have my press set to 390 and I'm going to let it go for 55 seconds. Now the count starts automatically once you press this down. When the timer goes off, you do open it yourself. And I used butcher paper because butcher paper can breathe. I'm using the butcher paper to protect the platen of my heat press. Sometimes sublimation ink can come up through the back of the sublimation paper, so I just always want to use a piece of butcher paper just to be careful. Now the time's almost up. When it's up, I'm going to lift this, pull the platen out, and just check a corner of the print. All right, let's see how these turned out. I think they're going to be so cute. Something black fell on there. That's not in the design. And it really is so sweet. That is gorgeous. Remember, I used a watercolor design to colorize the sweet and dreams. Now I see a little spot in the E. I know that was in the design because I checked it. It was in both E's on both of these before I pressed it. I was a little bit worried about that. But it kind of has a somewhat of an ombre effect. It goes from kind of an orangey red down to a pinkish and a purple. That pressed really nicely. These are going to look great. All right, let's take the paper out. Now, did any ink go through? I don't see any ink on this. But you have to be super careful when you're reusing butcher paper, because I'm telling you, this sublimation ink can pop up in the weirdest places where you don't ever notice it, like the edges of your paper or on butcher paper. It can pop up. So I typically err on the side of using new butcher paper when I have any questions at all. I can use that butcher paper for other things, like if I'm doing painting projects or something like that and I want to put it down on my table. But I don't know that I would use that again for a sublimation project. And then let's check out this one. That looks cute too. I have no idea if these are going to be about even. I should have measured and I didn't. If they're going to be side by side on the same bed, you kind of want them somewhat even, but it's going to be fine either way. It looks like this one actually goes downhill a little bit. I'll just adjust the pillow so you can't tell. Now in the end, here's the two pillowcases. I think they look super, super sweet. I will link the images that I used to make this in the video description. I'll link the heat press just in case you're interested in checking that out. And when you can use those links, I really appreciate it. It does help my channel. And I especially appreciate the time that you've taken out of your day to watch the video and spend a little bit of time with me. Thanks again for watching, and until my next video, bye-bye. Now, after I shut off the camera, I was really curious to see how they lined up. And actually, look, they look pretty good. I don't think anyone would notice if it's off just a bit.